The human face is a paradox, a canvas of truth and a gallery of lies. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who plumbed the depths of the unconscious, called this paradox the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the social world. It's not deceit in the malicious sense, but a necessity, a tailored garment we stitch from the threads of expectation, culture, and survival. Imagine a young man stepping into a boardroom, his shoulders squared, his voice steady, though inside he trembles with doubt. That's the persona at work, shaping him into what the room demands. Jung argued this mask isn't merely superficial. It's a bridge between the inner self and the outer stage, a psychological tool honed by evolution. Without it, we'd be raw, exposed, unable to function in the chaos of human interaction. But there's a catch. Wear the mask too long, and it fuses to your skin. You forget where it ends and you begin. This is where Jung's insight takes us, to the edge of identity, where the performance of me blurs into the essence of me. And it's here we find an unlikely companion in Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who danced with madness and roared against conformity. Nietzsche didn't use the word persona, but his philosophy hums with the same tension Jung described. He saw society as a forge, hammering individuals into shapes that fit its machinery, roles, norms, and moralities that strangle the spirit. To Nietzsche, the mask wasn't just a social convenience. It was a prison, a herd instinct that tamed the wild singular soul. Picture a woman at a dinner party, laughing politely at a joke she finds crude, nodding at opinions she despises. She's not lying, not exactly. She's surviving. Nietzsche would call this the triumph of the slave morality, where the weak band together to suppress the strong, forcing everyone into a collective disguise. But he didn't stop at critique. He urged us to rip off the mask, to become the Übermensch, the overman who crafts his own identity beyond the herd's reach. It's a call to rebellion, intoxicating and terrifying, because it demands we face the abyss of ourselves. Jung, though, wasn't so quick to discard the mask. For him, it was a tool, not a tyrant, something to wield consciously, lest it wield us. Two thinkers, two visions, yet both grapple with the same question. Who are we beneath the costume? Let's step into the theater of everyday life. You wake up, brew coffee, and slip into a version of yourself. Parent, worker, friend. Each role comes with its own script, its own mask. Jung saw this as natural, even essential. The persona lets us play these parts without losing our minds to the infinite complexity of existence. Think of a teacher standing before a classroom, her tone firm, her posture commanding, though she spent the morning crying over a broken relationship. The mask doesn't erase her pain, it suspends it, letting her function. Jung believed this adaptability was a hallmark of mental health, a balance between inner truth and outer demand. But Nietzsche would scoff at this compromise. To him, every role we play for others' sake is a betrayal of our potential. That teacher masking her tears isn't adapting, she's surrendering. He'd argue she should scream her sorrow, shatter the classroom's expectations, and forge a self unbound by such petty stages. It's a stark contrast, Jung's pragmatic dance with society versus Nietzsche's radical leap into the void. Yet both understood the weight of these masks, how they shape not just how others see us, but how we see ourselves. Now imagine the mask slipping. It happens. A moment of rage, a burst of honesty, a drunken confession. Jung called this the shadow breaking through, that dark, unpolished part of us the persona keeps in check. A man snaps at his boss after years of polite nods, and suddenly the room sees not the diligent employee, but the resentful soul beneath. Jung didn't judge this slip. He saw it as inevitable, even healthy if we learn from it. The persona isn't meant to be perfect. It's a negotiation, not a fortress. But Nietzsche? He'd cheer the outburst, call it a crack in the herd's armor. To him, those raw, unfiltered moments are glimpses of the true self, the one society fears and suppresses. He wrote of the will to power, not as brute domination, but as the drive to assert one's unique existence against the tide of conformity. That man's anger isn't weakness. It's a spark of the Übermensch, a refusal to be just another cog. Jung and Nietzsche meet here. In the chaos of the unmasked self, though one seeks to integrate it, the other to exalt it. Let's linger on that chaos. The shadow, the unmasked self. It's not pretty. It's the jealousy you hide behind a smile, the lust you cloak in indifference. Jung believed confronting this darkness was the path to wholeness, a process he called individuation. The persona in this journey is a guide, not the goal. It helps you face the world while you wrestle with what's inside. Picture a writer crafting polite emails by day, then pouring rage into a novel by night. The persona keeps her afloat. The shadow fuels her art. Jung's vision is patient, almost tender. Wear the mask, but know it's a mask, and seek the deeper you. Nietzsche, though, had no patience for such balance. He saw the shadow not as a burden to integrate, but a furnace to stoke. That writer's rage? She should wield it, not tame it, burn down the polite world and build her own. His Übermensch doesn't negotiate with darkness. It dances with it, shamelessly. It's a fierce ideal, one that seduces with its boldness but risks shattering us if we chase it too far. Jung offers a map. Nietzsche hands you a torch. Society, of course, doesn't care for torches or maps. It wants masks that fit. Think of the pressure to conform, the suit you wear, the slang you adopt, the opinions you echo. Jung saw this as the collective unconscious at play, a shared pool of archetypes and expectations we all draw from. The persona emerges from this pool, shaped by myths and norms older than any of us. A politician grins on camera, promising hope, though his heart's cold. His mask isn't just his own. It's borrowed from centuries of leaders before him. Jung found this fascinating, almost beautiful, a testament to our interconnectedness. But Nietzsche despised it. He called it the spirit of gravity, a force dragging us into mediocrity. That politician's grin? A symptom of the herd, a refusal to stand alone. Nietzsche dreamed of a self carved from stone, not clay molded by the masses. Yet even he couldn't escape the irony. His own writings, his bombastic style, were a kind of mask, a performance to shock the world awake. Jung might smile at that. None of us, not even the rebels, can fully shed the stage. So what happens when the stage collapses? A crisis, divorce, disgrace, war, strips the mask away. Jung saw these moments as portals to the self, where the persona fails and the shadow surges. A soldier returns from battle, his cheerful facade shattered, his nights plagued by screams he can't silence. The mask he wore, brave, stoic, crumbles, and he's left with the raw human beneath. Jung would urge him to embrace this, to weave the pain into his identity, not just hide it again. It's brutal, but it's growth. Nietzsche, though, might see a different path. That soldier's pain is power, proof he's no longer the herd's puppet. He could rise from it, not as a healed man, but as a new one, defying the world that broke him. It's a romantic vision, almost mythic, and it clashes with Jung's quieter realism. Yet both agree the mass loss is a reckoning, a chance to face what we've buried. The soldier's story isn't unique. We all have our crises, our unmaskings, and how we respond shapes who we become. Let's zoom out to the modern world, social media, where masks multiply. You curate a profile, witty, polished, perfect. Jung would call it a digital persona, an extension of the old game with new rules. A teenager posts a selfie, all confidence, though she hates her reflection offline. The mask isn't just for others now, it's for herself, a mirror of who she wants to be. Jung might nod approvingly. The persona adapts to the age, helping us cope with scrutiny. But Nietzsche would rage. This isn't adaptation. It's slavery to the screen, to likes, to the herd's applause. He'd see that teenager's selfie as a plea for validation, not a declaration of self. His Übermensch wouldn't pose for the crowd. He'd shatter the camera. The tension here is palpable. Jung's persona bends to technology, while Nietzsche's ideal spits on it. Yet both would marvel at the stakes. Online, the mask isn't just worn, it's broadcast, judged, immortalized. The line between performance and reality blurs further, and the question grows louder. Are we crafting these masks, or are they crafting us? That question haunts us because masks aren't static. They evolve. Jung believed the persona shifts with life seasons, child, student, lover, elder, each role a new face. A woman retires after decades as a nurse, her crisp professionalism fading into a quieter, softer self. The mask doesn't vanish. It adapts, reflecting her new place in the world. Jung saw this as healthy, a sign of flexibility. But Nietzsche would probe deeper. Is she choosing this shift, or is society choosing it for her? He'd warned that even in retirement, the herd whispers, be gentle, be invisible, be old. His Übermensch resists such scripts, rewriting the rules at every turn. Picture her rejecting quiet decline, starting a wild, reckless adventure instead. Nietzsche's vision thrills, but it's exhausting. Few can sustain that defiance. Jung's path feels more human, more forgiving. Wear the mask, adjust it, but always peek beneath. The nurse's story isn't over. Her persona's evolution is her power, not her cage. Two philosophies, two lenses, one pragmatic, one fiery, both wrestling with the dance of change. Now let's dive into love, where masks twist and tangle. You meet someone and the persona shines, charming, attentive, flawless. Jung knew this game. The lover's mask is ancient, drawn from the archetype of romance. A man woos his partner with grand gestures, hiding his insecurities beneath roses and candlelight. It's not a lie, it's a bridge, letting connection bloom before the messier self emerges. Jung saw this as necessary, a step toward intimacy. But Nietzsche would sneer. That mask, he'd say, is cowardice, a dodge from the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. He'd demand the man bear his flaws from the start, risk rejection, and build love on something fiercer than flattery. It's a noble idea, but brutal. Most relationships couldn't survive such honesty. Jung's persona offers a gentler arc. The mask eases you in, then fades as trust grows. Nietzsche's ideal skips the foreplay, plunging straight into the abyss. Both see love as a mirror, though, one reflecting the masks we wear and the selves we hide. The man with the roses? He's every one of us, balancing performance and vulnerability, hoping the mask holds just long enough. Art, too, is a mask, a canvas for the soul's disguise. Jung adored this. He saw creativity as the shadow's playground, where the persona steps aside and the unconscious speaks. A painter splashes fury onto a canvas, her polite daytime self nowhere in sight. The mask of civility lifts, and what's beneath is wild, true, messy. Jung called this a sacred act, a dialogue with the deeper self. Nietzsche, though, saw art differently, not as therapy, but as conquest. That painter's fury isn't just expression, it's her will to power, her refusal to bow to the world's blandness. He wrote that art is the highest task in the proper metaphysical activity of this life, a throne for the Übermensch. Where Jung finds healing, Nietzsche finds triumph. Yet both meet in the act itself. The mask of the everyday falls, and something authentic emerges. The painter's story isn't unique. Writers, musicians, dancers all know this shedding. It's why art moves us. It's the sound of mask cracking, of humans daring to be more than their roles. Jung and Nietzsche, psychologists of the soul, frame it differently, but they'd both stand before that canvas, captivated. What about madness? Jung and Nietzsche knew it well. Jung studied it, Nietzsche lived it. The persona, Jung argued, can crumble under strain, leaving us unmoored. A woman loses her job, her identity tied to it, and suddenly she's adrift, her mask useless. Jung saw this as a call to individuation, a painful but vital rebirth. Madness, in small doses, was a teacher, showing us the self beyond the script. Nietzsche's madness was darker, more personal. His collapse into silence after years of railing against the herd reads like a Greek tragedy. Was it the cost of tearing off the mask too fiercely? He'd worn one too, prophet, provocateur, until it couldn't hold. His Übermensch ideal might shrug at this, claiming madness as the price of greatness, but his life whispers a warning. The herd's gravity pulls even the strongest down. Jung might pity him, seeing a man who didn't balance the mask and the shadow. Together, they frame insanity as the edge of identity, where the persona fails and the self either shatters or soars. It's a grim mirror for us all. Power, too, wears a mask. Jung saw it in leaders. The king, the CEO, whose personas project strength, hiding doubt. A president addresses a nation, voice steady, though he wrestles with fear in private. The mask isn't just for show, it's the role's backbone, letting him lead. Jung found this archetypal, a thread in humanity's story. Nietzsche, predictably, saw it as a farce. Power to him wasn't in the mask. It was in shedding it, in commanding through sheer, unapologetic will. That president's steady voice? A plea for approval, not dominance. The Übermensch doesn't perform? He is. Yet Nietzsche's own hunger for influence, his thunderous prose, betrays a mask of its own. Jung might chuckle. Even the rebel plays the game. Power's dance is universal. We don the mask to wield it, whether in boardrooms or revolutions. The president's struggle is ours. Authority rests on the persona, but its cracks reveal the human beneath. Jung and Nietzsche dissect this differently, one with a scalpel, one with a hammer, but both expose the theater of control. Power, too, wears a mask. Jung saw it in leaders, the king, the CEO, whose personas project strength, hiding doubt. A president addresses a nation, voice steady, though he wrestles with fear in private. The mask isn't just for show, it's the role's backbone, letting him lead. Jung found this archetypal, a thread in humanity's story. Nietzsche, predictably, saw it as a farce. Power to him wasn't in the mask. It was in shedding it, in commanding through sheer unapologetic will. That president's steady voice? A plea for approval, not dominance? The Übermensch doesn't perform. He is. Yet Nietzsche's own hunger for influence, his thunderous prose, betrays a mask of its own. Jung might chuckle. Even the rebel plays the game. Power's dance is universal. We don the mask to wield it, whether in boardrooms or revolutions. The president's struggle is ours. Authority rests on the persona, but its cracks reveal the human beneath. Jung and Nietzsche dissect this differently, one with a scalpel, one with a hammer, but both expose the theater of control. Let's pause on childhood, where masks begin. Jung believed the persona forms early, shaped by parents, peers, rules. A boy learns to smile when he's sad, to please his mother, and the mask takes root. It's not forced, it's instinct, a shield against a world too big to face bare. Jung saw this as growth, the ego finding its footing. Nietzsche, though, would mourn it. That smile, he'd argue, is the herd's first victory, training the boy to bow before he can stand. The Übermensch resists from the cradle, defying even love's gentle chains. It's a harsh view, but it stings with truth. Conformity starts young. Jung's persona is a gift here, letting the boy navigate childhood's storms. Nietzsche's ideal is a dream, too heavy for small shoulders. Yet both see the stakes. That boy's smile isn't just a moment. It's the seed of every mask he'll wear, every role he'll play. We're all that child learning to perform before we know why, caught between survival and authenticity from the start. Age, too, reshapes the mask. Jung observed how the persona softens in later years, or hardens depending on the life lived. An old man sits on a porch, his once sharp wit now a quiet nod. His mask has faded with his energy, revealing more of the self beneath. Jung saw this as natural, a return to the inner world. Nietzsche, ever defiant, would reject this retreat. Old age to him isn't for fading, it's for burning brighter. The Übermensch raging against time itself. That man should spit on the porch, not sit on it, proclaiming his will until the end. It's a glorious impossibility, clashing with Jung's gentler arc. Yet both grasp the weight of years. The mask either binds tighter or slips away, exposing what we've become. The old man's nod isn't weakness. It's a story, etched in lines no mask can hide. Jung and Nietzsche, through their lenses, remind us age isn't just decline. It's a reckoning with every mask we've worn, a final act in the play of self. Faith, too, crafts masks. Jung saw religion as a source of archetypes, the saint, the sinner, shaping personas that connect us to the divine. A priest preaches peace, his voice serene, though doubt gnaws at him. The mask aligns him with his flock, with God, even as his shadow wrestles below. Jung revered this tension, a bridge to the unconscious. Nietzsche famously scorned it. God is dead, he declared, and with it, the mass of piety. That priest's serenity to him is a lie, a crutch for the weak. The Übermensch needs no faith but his own. Yet Nietzsche's atheism was its own mask. Bold, defiant, a performance of freedom. Jung might point out the irony. Even in rejection, we borrow from the collective. Faith or its absence molds us. Priest or philosopher, we wear its face. The priest's doubt isn't failure. It's human. A crack in the mask that Jung would study, Nietzsche would exploit. Both see the sacred as a stage. Whether we kneel or curse. What of solitude? Jung saw it as the persona's rest, a space to shed the mask and face the self. A woman retreats to a cabin, no eyes to please, and finds her thoughts unfiltered, fierce, tender, strange. Jung called this vital, a step toward wholeness. Nietzsche, too, prized solitude, but not for peace, for power. Alone, that woman isn't resting. She's forging, stripping the herd's weight to become more. His Zarathustra descends from the mountain, not to heal, but to proclaim. Jung's solitude is introspective, Nietzsche's explosive, yet both see it as the mask's crucible. The woman in the cabin isn't escaping. She's deciding who she'll be when she returns. We all crave that silence, that unmasking, though few dare linger there. Jung and Nietzsche frame it as a gift, a burden, a mirror. Solitude is where the persona pauses and the self speaks, whether in whispers or roars. Let's circle back to madness, because it's where masks dissolve entirely. Jung treated patients whose personas shattered, voices, visions, selves splintered. He didn't fear this. He saw it as the unconscious unbound, a chaotic bid for renewal. A man rants on a street corner, his mask gone, his truth spilling out. Jung would listen, seeking the meaning beneath. Nietzsche, who crossed that line himself, might call it liberation. The herd's rules torched, the Übermensch glimpsed in fragments. His own breakdown, scribbling frantic notes till silence took him, echoes that street preacher's cry. Jung's madness heals, Nietzsche's consumes. Yet both understood its pull. When the mask falls, we're naked, terrifying, alive. That man on the corner isn't just mad. He's us, stripped to the bone. Jung and Nietzsche, in their genius and their wounds, knew this edge, this abyss where identity frays and something else emerges, monstrous or divine. Finally, death, the last mask, or its end. Jung saw it as the ultimate unknown, where the persona fades and the self meets the infinite. A dying woman smiles at her family, her mask of strength intact, though she trembles inside. Jung might say she's crossing over, her individuation complete. Nietzsche, who faced death's shadow in his collapse, saw no such peace. Death to him is the final challenge. Rip off the mask, defy the void, assert the will one last time. That woman's smile, a surrender unless she laughs at fate instead. His Übermensch doesn't bow, even here. Jung's vision comforts, Nietzsche's electrifies, yet both confront mortality as the persona's test. That woman's smile is ours, worn till the end, hiding fear, showing love. Jung and Nietzsche in their clash leave us this. The mask is our life's art, our lie, our truth, and death decides what it meant. So we live masked, Jung's tool, Nietzsche's chain. Every day we don it. The workers nod, the lovers grin, the rebels snarl. Jung bids us wield it wisely, know its limits, seek the self beneath. Nietzsche dares us to cast it off, to stand alone, fierce and free. A man walks home shedding the day's roles, employee, husband, citizen, wondering who remains. Jung would say he's growing, Nietzsche that he's waking. Both are right and neither. The mask isn't just worn, it's us, a skin we can't fully shed, a mirror we can't fully break. This is the dance between persona and power, shadow and will, herd and hero. Jung and Nietzsche, two voices from the depths, call us to it. not to choose, but to wrestle, to live the question. That man, you, me, we're all behind the mask, and the play never ends.